Chapter 121 Justice will prevail. Upon hearing Caspian's words, Garrett felt hopeless. Caspian, even if I'm guilty, I shouldn't get a death sentence. Especially not by your hands. Ezekiel objected. I'm the Lord of Diatoran. I have the same right as the king, Caspian declared. But I haven't killed anyone. My crime isn't that severe, Ezekiel argued. As the head of the Inspector General's office, you colluded with the flying dragons to cover up the truth and destroy evidence. Last night, you weren't as righteous as you are today. You deserve to die 10 times over for the crimes you've committed, Caspian stated. I object. You can't use extrajudicial means against me. Ezekiel would rather face trial in court than fall in Caspian's hands. So what if I use extrajudicial means against you? No one will stand up for a scum like you. Don't kill me. I didn't plan last night's operation. It was all ordered by Zachary. Ezekiel shifted all the blame to Zachary. Zachary will have his own consequences. You had already committed a grave crime when you openly opposed the troop, Caspian asserted sternly. Ezekiel slumped to the ground, his face pale. He hadn't anticipated the weight of his own guilt. At this moment, his heart was filled with despair. He knew it was easy for someone as powerful as Caspian to execute him. Ezekiel regretted his actions deeply. He regretted colluding with the York family and the Flying Dragons, leading to his grim fate. Justice will always prevail. Execute him, Caspian said coldly. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. I don't want to die yet. Lord Caspian, please spare me. Ezekiel and Garrett were begging for their lives. In the face of death, they were extremely terrified. No matter how cruel they were before, fear had taken over their hearts now that they were on the brink of death. Shut up. You were far more arrogant last night. Think about the inhumane acts you've committed. This is the consequence of you murdering the innocent, Caspian shouted. Please let me go. I'll change for the better. Ezekiel pleaded bitterly. Ezekiel, you scum. My mother acted bravely, yet you twisted the truth. If you don't die, I won't be able to face her, Caspian said indignantly. As long as you don't kill me, I'll give you whatever you want. I can give you all of the Flying Dragon's fortune, Garrett pleaded. That's right. I have some savings too. If you can spare me, I'll give you all my assets. I just want to stay alive. Ezekiel was still desperately trying, hoping Caspian would spare him. If you had realized your mistakes earlier, maybe there wouldn't have been so much trouble. But it's too late now. Execute them. 2 gunshots echoed. Garrett and Ezekiel fell to the ground. The 2 parasites of South Lake City finally met their end. They couldn't have imagined they would meet such a tragic end. Nadia, Zachary, Samuel, Dawn, and Derek were scared when they saw the fates of Ezekiel and the others. At that moment, fear engulfed them. They didn't know when it would be their turn. The unknown fear was tormenting. Bring Derek up here, Caspian ordered. When Derek heard this, he trembled all over. At that moment, he had given up all hope. Don't kill me. Don't kill me, he cried out. Not only did you kill my mother, but you also had bad intentions toward my wife. Do you think you deserve to live? Caspian said expressionlessly. How would I know you're the Diaturanian god of war? If I had known your identity, I wouldn't have dared to do such a thing. Derek cried out. You've committed countless crimes and harmed so many women. An arrogant and cruel human like you deserves to be punished. When Derek heard this, he became even more terrified. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. Please give me a chance. I'll change. Change in the afterlife. Caspian said indifferently. Grandma, Dad, Mom, please save me. I'm still young. I don't want to die. Derek knew his fate was sealed. He could only seek help from his family. But they were in dire straits too. They couldn't save him at all. Don't kill Derek. He's still young. That's why he made such a mistake. Give him a chance to start afresh. Dawn pleaded. Yes, please don't kill him, Samuel added. He's already an adult, hence he needs to be responsible for his actions. His current fate is the result of your poor teachings, Caspian retorted. Your foster mother is dead. Even if you go on a killing spree now, it wouldn't make a change. As long as you let our family go, You can have as much money as you want, Nadia proposed. Can money solve everything? It's because of these actions of yours that you've bred such a scum. Do you think I, the Dieteranian god of war, care about your money? To me, money is merely meaningless numbers. This grudge has to be settled. Please spare his life. We'll discipline him strictly in the future. Dawn pleaded again. There was not an ounce of remorse in your family after killing my mother. You even tried to assassinate me. Your entire York family is a scum to society. There's no need for such people to live, Caspian declared. After hearing his words, the York family felt utter despair. It seemed the York family was going to be wiped out. Bring Derek to my mother's grave. I'll deal with him personally, Caspian ordered. 2 guards brought Derek to Lilith's grave. 1 guard handed Caspian a gun. The York family was shocked to see that Caspian was going to execute Derek with his own hands. This showed how much he hated Derek. Caspian had vowed to seek revenge, and he followed through. Derek was the ringleader, and had to be dealt with. Don't kill me. I don't want to die, Derek cried uncontrollably as fear consumed him. Instead of firing immediately, Caspian wanted him to feel the impending fear and helplessness before death arrived. Chapter 122, The King's Handwriting. You're the mastermind behind my mother's death. She was already gravely injured, and yet you still harmed her. A heartless person like you will just continue to pose a threat to others if you survive. Now, face your judgment, Caspian said coldly. John and the others felt no sympathy watching Caspian deal with these criminals. They were true soldiers at heart. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. I really don't want to die. Please, I'm begging you. Derek was consumed by endless fear. The thought of death filled him with terror. A gunshot echoed as Caspian personally executed Derek. Derek's body fell to the ground, utterly breathless. Nadia, Samuel, and Dawn were overwhelmed with grief as they witnessed this scene. Derek, my son. Samuel and Dawn were heartbroken seeing their son being executed. The pain they felt was unbearable. Nadia almost fainted when she saw her most beloved grandson killed before her eyes. In contrast, Zachary felt no emotion when he watched Derek's execution. If it weren't for Derek causing trouble, the York family wouldn't be facing such a fate, and he wouldn't have been apprehended. Bring Samuel and Dawn here, Caspian ordered. 4 guards went to drag the crying Samuel and Dawn over. Fear filled their hearts as they didn't want to die as well. Caspian, what else do you want? Samuel questioned with a trembling voice. Caspian, my son has been executed by you. Aren't you satisfied? Can't you let us go? Dawn said with a trembling voice. Your poor guidance is to blame for Derek's lack of humanity, so you're also accountable, Caspian retorted. We have nothing to do with your foster mother's death, but you still want to execute us. Samuel questioned. That's right. You covered up for your son even after knowing his crime. So, you're equally guilty and should face the same punishment. Please, don't. Even though we covered up for him, our mistake isn't that severe to warrant such punishment. Dawn was extremely terrified. Not only did you do that, but you also hired assassins to kill me. Do you think I'll spare you? Caspian said coldly. We'll never do it again. Please give us another chance. Samuel pleaded desperately. It's too late. With a command, Caspian ordered, execute them. As the Dieteranian god of war, he wouldn't show mercy to such heartless people. Then, Samuel and Dawn were executed as well. Nadia was at the peak of agony as she watched her son and grandson die one after another. Now, only she and her eldest son, Zachary, were left. Bring Zachary to me. Caspian gave another order. Upon hearing his name called by Caspian, Zachary trembled in fear. He was brought before Caspian and knelt before him. Zachary, do you admit your guilt? Caspian asked with a stern face. What is my guilt? Zachary retorted. You show no remorse even on the brink of death. Ezekiel told me that you're the mastermind behind the incident on the cliff of death. I was confused. Hence I made such a mistake. Give me a chance. I won't do it ever again, Zachary pleaded. As the regional chief in the Two Lakes area, you colluded with people like Ezekiel. If it weren't for my troops' timely arrival, I might have died on the cliff of death last night. Since you're the mastermind, Your fate is ultimately death, Caspian asserted. I'm the regional chief. Even if I am guilty, it's for the king to decide. You have no authority to execute me. Zachary attempted a final fight. The king appointed me as the head of the investigative team to eradicate people like you. What? You're the head of the investigative team? Zachary was immensely shocked. Last night, you even carried classified documents to the embassy of Tigra, committing treason. This adds to your crime, Caspian said. I am the regional chief of the Two Lakes area. The king will never agree to your extrajudicial killing. I demand to see the king, Zachary asserted. The king isn't someone a scum like you can meet. Take him away and execute him. Caspian didn't want to waste time on Zachary. At that moment, a guard hurried in. Lord Caspian, the king's messenger requests to see you, the guard said to Caspian. What? The king has sent someone. Caspian was shocked. Yes. Should we bring the messenger in? Asked the guard. Yes. Go quickly. Yes. Lord Caspian. Ha ha ha. I told you that you have no authority to kill me. See, the king has sent someone to save me. Zachary laughed heartily. When Nadia heard that the king's messenger was here, she felt a glimmer of hope. However, she felt it was a little late for the messenger to arrive as there were only her and Zachary left in the York family. 2 minutes later, the messenger arrived before Caspian. Why did the king send you here? Asked Caspian. Lord Caspian, the king has relayed a quote that he wrote himself to mourn for your foster mother, the messenger stated. Upon hearing the messenger's response, Zachary and Nadia were stunned. Wasn't the king supposed to send someone to stop Caspian? As the messenger finished his words, he recited the quote, "The courage to face challenges shapes timeless legacies." Upon close inspection, it was indeed Balthazar's handwriting. To receive a quote personally written by the king was undoubtedly a great honor. Subsequently, the messenger placed the quote in front of Lilith's grave and paid his respects. Lord Caspian, please accept my condolences, the messenger said as he stood before Caspian. Is there anything that the king instructed? Zachary anxiously asked the messenger. Nothing more. The messenger shook his head. Caspian is killing innocent lives. Please let the king know and make him stop Caspian, Zachary shouted. Lord Caspian holds the power of life and death. The king won't interfere, the messenger replied. I don't believe it. Please, let me speak to the king. I need to report what's happening here, Zachary demanded. Just then, Caspian received a phone call, and it was from Balthazar. Caspian answered immediately. Your Majesty. Chapter 123 Farewell. Upon hearing Caspian greet the king, Zachary and Nadia felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps the king called to stop Caspian. Caspian, did you receive the item I sent? Balthazar asked over the phone. I received it. Thank you, Your Majesty, Caspian replied. My condolences. I just received the news. You must be strong. The soldiers need you, Balthazar advised. I understand. Caspian nodded. You actually let John barge into the embassy of Tigra. You're quite bold, Balthazar remarked. Zachary took confidential information and intended to betray the country. I had no choice but to make such a decision. Your Majesty, please punish me. Why should I punish you? Caspian was puzzled for a moment. He thought Balthazar was going to question his actions. You handled yesterday's matter very well. I'm satisfied, Balthazar praised. Your Majesty is too kind. Did my actions cause any trouble? Caspian inquired. A bit of trouble, but nothing serious. All right. I have other matters to attend to. I will hang up now. With that, Balthazar ended the call. Seeing Caspian's calm demeanor, Zachary felt something was amiss. Caspian, what did the king say to you? Was it to let me go? Zachary asked anxiously. Stop dreaming. The king doesn't care about such matters at all, Caspian said coldly. When Zachary and Nadia heard his words, they were instantly frightened. They had hoped for a chance of survival, but ended up inevitably facing death. Do you have any last words? Caspian asked. I don't want to die. Can you spare me? Zachary pleaded desperately. As the regional chief of the Two Lakes area, not only did you shield and condone your family's crime, But you also attempted treason. Both are serious crimes. Your fate is only death, Caspian declared firmly. Upon hearing his words, Zachary collapsed to the ground. Take him away and execute him. Caspian waved his hand as he ordered. A gunshot rang, and Zachary fell to the ground. Nadia was overwhelmed with grief at this moment. All her descendants had died before her eyes. Nadia, you're last. Caspian stared intently at her. Caspian, I'm old. Have mercy on me, please, Nadia pleaded as she was afraid of death. I hate you the most. You wicked old hag. Don't even think that I'll spare you, Caspian said fiercely. Although Nadia's family was dead, and the York family didn't exist anymore, she still wanted to live. As the head of the York family, you failed to educate your offspring. You bear the most responsibility for the fall of the York family, Caspian said. I'm the only one left in the York family. Can't you let me go? I'm an old woman. I pose no threat to you. She was still begging for her life. I wish I could tear you into pieces for everything you've done. It's already doing you a favor by giving you a quick death. Drag her over and execute her, Caspian ordered. 2 guards dragged Nadia to Lilith's grave. She couldn't help but tremble as she saw the bodies lying on the ground. She never imagined that the York family would be wiped out one day. It all started with her grandson, who was arrogant and killed Lilith. None of the York family members admitted to their mistake as they attempted to cover their crimes. If there was a chance for a fresh start, Nadia would have made Zachary surrender. However, it was too late now. The sound of a gunshot broke out, and Nadia got her punishment as she died in front of Lilith's grave. Thus, the entire York family was exterminated. From now on, there would be no more York family in South Lake City. Even the notorious flying dragons ceased to exist following the deaths of Ezekiel and the rest. This time, Caspian accomplished 2 things. He avenged Lilith and eliminated threats in South Lake City. Caspian looked at the bodies across the ground. All those involved in the murder of his foster mother had been executed. At that moment, a slight sense of relief washed over his heart. Mom, your grudge has been avenged. I hope you'll rest in peace. Caspian choked as he gazed at Lilith's portrait. Fire, Julian ordered. The guards fired their guns into the sky, bidding farewell to Lilith. With that, the memorial service ended. Following that, Caspian instructed his subordinates to clean the bodies on the ground. Julian, Caspian called out. Present. Julian stood straight before Caspian. Lead the troop back to South Aridlands, Caspian commanded. The troop needed to remain in South Aridlands. Otherwise, if any danger arose in South Aridlands, he would be held accountable. Yes, Lord Caspian. Please take care. Until we meet again, Julian replied. All right. Until our next meeting in South Aridlands, Caspian affirmed. Salute to Madame Ziegler, Julian shouted once again. All the guards saluted toward Lilith's grave. Lilith was a loyal soldier who had sacrificed herself heroically. She had earned the respect of everyone present. Then, Julian led the troop and left. Meanwhile, John and his subordinates returned to South Aridlands. Caspian didn't stop them. After all, they had important matters to attend to. After everyone departed, Sylvia said to Caspian, Lord Caspian, let's leave too. She was tasked to protect Caspian, so she didn't leave. Okay. He nodded. They drove away from South Lake Cemetery. Willow, Miranda, Joey, and Zoe were getting a bit anxious while waiting outside. Once they got inside the car, Willow asked curiously, Caspian, what was that noise earlier? It was a farewell from my mother, Caspian answered. Not the final gunshots. I mean those gunshots in between. Those noises were from the criminals being executed by gunfire. He answered with no emotions. You killed all of the York family, the flying dragons, and Ezekiel, Willow asked, shocked. Not me. I don't have that authority. It was the order given by General Anderson. Caspian lied to hide the truth. Willow nodded without saying more. These criminals have finally received their punishment. From now on, South Lake City will be peaceful. Joel sighed. How could it be peaceful? But now that Ezekiel has been killed, the Inspector General's office can't operate without a head. I think you have a high chance of becoming the head, Caspian teased. Chapter 124, The New Inspector General. Caspian, don't joke with me. I'm just the chief of the investigative team. It's impossible for me to be the new Inspector General. You're just teasing me, Joey said. After returning to Riverside Villa, Joey drove her car back to the Inspector General's office. Meanwhile, Willow and Miranda went back to work at Southlake Corporation. Now that the Flying Dragons had been wiped out, Caspian no longer needed to personally protect Willow. However, he remembered Joey's matter and immediately called Sylvia. Under the name of the investigative team, he instructed her to inform the person in charge of South Lake City and the Two Lakes area to convene for a meeting the next morning. When the political figures of South Lake City knew that the investigative team was involved, they didn't dare to disobey Sylvia's instructions. They were well aware of the implications of being summoned by the investigative team. The next day, Sylvia picked up Caspian and they headed to the meeting venue. At exactly 9:00 a.m., Caspian and Sylvia walked into the meeting room. The prominent figures of South Lake City were shocked to see them enter. They knew about Caspian, but had no idea what was the reason for Caspian and Sylvia to be there. Could it be that these two were also invited to the meeting? Although they had various doubts, none of them dared to voice them out. After all, there were so many influential figures that attended Lilith's memorial yesterday. Even John, the highest-ranked general of South Aridlands, was there. The fact that such influential figures attended the event indicated that Caspian had a special identity. These political figures were all astute individuals who had experienced the ins and outs of the political arena for many years. They naturally understood this. As for the prominent figures from the Two Lakes area, they had no idea who Caspian was, just as they thought Caspian and Sylvia were merely invited guests. Caspian walked straight to the head seat in the conference room and took a seat there. Meanwhile, Sylvia sat beside him. "Hello, everyone. I'm Caspian Lynch, the head of the investigative team sent by the King of Diatoran." Caspian announced his identity as soon as he sat down. Upon hearing this, everyone was stunned. They never expected that the famous good-for-nothing of South Lake City would actually be the head of the investigative team sent by the King of Diatoran. The position as the head of the investigative team was far above their status. "The person beside me is Sylvia Frost. She's assisting me with my job. Her other identity is a general officer." Caspian introduced Sylvia. At that moment, they realized that Sylvia's identity was real all along. They understood now that Sylvia had intentionally spread the news about her fake identity as a general officer as a cover-up for the investigative team. If it weren't for the fact that they saw John at the memorial service yesterday, they would have thought Caspian was impersonating the head of the investigative team. But now, no one doubted his identity. Caspian had only revealed one of his identities, yet everyone present was already nervous. If they knew about his identity as the Diateranian god of war, they would probably be scared out of their wits. After the introductions, Caspian went straight to the point. South Lake City is a small city, but it unexpectedly harbored a gang like the Flying Dragons. They were vicious and killed many innocent lives. How have all of you been managing the city? Hearing his somewhat angry tone, everyone remained silent. "A few nights ago, I was captured by Ezekiel's subordinates and taken to the Cliff of Death. All the members of the Flying Dragons were present, waiting to take action on me. When the Inspector General's office knew about this, only Joey Sanders came to my rescue. Where were the rest of the inspectors?" Caspian questioned. Caspian said this to help pave the way for Joey. The influential figures of South Lake City instantly trembled with fear. They were responsible for the Inspector General's office, yet such a thing happened under their watch. Many people present were uneasy. They didn't even know that such a shocking incident happened a few nights ago in South Lake City. "Do you know that Joey fought against the Flying Dragons alone? If all the inspectors had come to her aid, she wouldn't have been surrounded. She's a female inspector who's brave and fearless. She was willing to fight to the death. Meanwhile, all of you were sitting in your offices, reading newspapers and doing nothing. Don't you feel ashamed?" Caspian spoke angrily. No one dared to meet his eyes and chose to keep their heads down in silence. "This matter will not end easily. I will inform His Majesty to thoroughly investigate the Two Lakes area. Ezekiel, as the head of the Inspector General's office, colluded with the flying dragons. For that, I have executed him, Caspian said, toning down his voice. Even though his tone wasn't that serious, the people present still felt a sense of fear. They had no idea Ezekiel was executed. At this moment, they understood clearly that Caspian's methods were unexpectedly merciless. If Caspian got a hold of their leverage, their fate might be similar to that of Ezekiel. The Inspector General's office can't be without an Inspector General. You need to find a new Inspector General. I'm the head of the investigative team and only responsible for investigating. The selection of the new Inspector General will be up to you, Caspian said. After hearing his words, everyone exchanged glances. They realized there was more to his words than what was said. However, no one dared to speak, and they all fell into silence. They were afraid that their choices might not align with what Caspian had in mind. If it weren't for Joey's timely arrival, I would have been in great danger. Therefore, I intend to inform His Majesty to reward her, Caspian stated firmly. After hearing this, everyone suddenly understood his intention. It was obvious that he wanted Joey to be the new Inspector General of South Lake City. Although Caspian didn't directly say it, his intention was crystal clear. They understood his implication. If they couldn't discern his intention, there would be no point for them to continue their careers. Currently, the only person suitable to be the new Inspector General for South Lake City is Captain Joey. The Deputy Governor of the Two Lakes area said, "That's right. I also believe Captain Joey is the perfect fit for the role," echoed a figure from South Lake City. "Joey has always been diligent and responsible. There's no issue with her leading the Inspector General's office," the Deputy Governor added. Everyone agreed that Joey should become the new Inspector General. "Joey indeed saved me, but you don't have to add this as a reason. You can choose the most suitable candidate according to your own thoughts. I won't interfere with this matter," Caspian deliberately stated. Upon hearing this, everyone was momentarily perplexed. They were unsure of his intention. After all, Joey is just a captain. Her qualifications might not be enough to take on this important role. "Do you have any other candidates in mind?" Caspian looked around the room. Chapter 125, Encountering His Teacher. Everyone present was a bit dumbfounded. However, they quickly understood Caspian's intention. Comrade Joey doesn't lack the qualifications. As far as I know, she has always been diligent in her duties and frequently tore down the territories of the Flying Dragons. Such a person is fit to be the Inspector General. Who else can take on this role if she can't? A figure from South Lake City remarked. Indeed, when Joey was at the Rocky Den, she managed to capture many criminals. I fully support her becoming the new Inspector General. Exactly. Joey is the most suitable person to hold the position of Inspector General. All those present listed Joey's achievements and contributions one after another. I didn't expect Joey to have so many achievements. However, the selection of the Inspector General is your decision, Caspian said calmly. His goals had been achieved. Hearing Caspian's words, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Now that the decision is made, let's implement this matter quickly. The Inspector General's office is a large department and can't be without a leader, Caspian remarked. Yes, sir. I will immediately get this done, said the Deputy Governor of the Two Lakes area. The first matter is concluded. Now, there's another issue, Caspian continued. Upon hearing that there was another matter to be handled, everyone became nervous again. They feared the matter might be related to them. This matter involves Zachary, the regional chief in the Two Lakes area, who attempted to sell classified documents to Tigra. His situation was extremely grave as it was considered treason. He was captured by me and has been executed, Caspian stated. Everyone was utterly shocked to hear this. They had heard some rumors about John surrounding the embassy of Tigra with his troops. However, no one had anticipated that Caspian had already executed Zachary. Zachary was the regional chief in the Two Lakes area, yet he was executed by Caspian. This showed the immense power Caspian held. No need to be surprised. The king had granted me this execution authority, Caspian said calmly. Upon hearing his words, everyone suddenly realized that the king had given Caspian such huge power. However, they couldn't understand why the good Nothing. Caspian was highly regarded by Balthazar. Actually, I didn't intend to take on the role of head of the investigative team, but since His Majesty granted it, I had to comply. I hope you won't end up like Ezekiel and Zachary. Otherwise, I assure you, your fate will be worse than theirs, Caspian said coldly. Hearing this, those who had previously committed misdeeds became restless. If you perform your duties well like Joey, I'll ask the higher authorities to reward you, Caspian added. As for the new governor of the Two Lakes area, this position will be handled by the higher-ups, Caspian said calmly. Even so, the attendees felt unprecedented pressure. They could only obediently listen, as they were afraid to even breathe audibly. One last thing, the fact that Sylvia and I are in charge of the investigative team must not be leaked. After all, we're also here to conduct an investigation secretly. If anyone leaks my identity, be prepared to face consequences, Caspian stated expressionlessly. We will definitely keep this a secret, everyone hurriedly assured. Well, the meeting ends here. You can all go back and attend to your own matters, Caspian said. Then he stood up and left. Sylvia followed him out of the conference room. Throughout the entire meeting, she didn't utter a word. Later, Caspian had Sylvia drive him around South Lake City. There were no more conflicts in South Aridlands, and the parasites of South Lake City were gone. Since Caspian was in charge of the investigative team, he needed to understand the situation in South Lake City. As they drove down a street, he noticed 6 or 7 thugs assaulting a vendor in the distance. Vegetables were scattered on the ground. Although many bystanders were watching, no one stepped in to help. Upon closer inspection, Caspian realized that the woman being beaten was his former teacher, Stephanie Wildman. Back then, when he was in high school, everyone looked down on him for being poor. But Stephanie valued him greatly. She provided him with help in both life and studies. She even occasionally supported Caspian financially. Caspian had always been grateful to her. Even after achieving success, he had visited Stephanie at his old high school, but had never revealed his true identity. Unexpectedly, he encountered his former teacher here today. There were several thugs kicking and punching her. Seeing this, Caspian was furious. "Stop the car," he shouted. He was enraged and puzzled. He wondered how his teacher ended up as a street vendor. "Caspian, it's better if you don't show yourself." "Let me handle it," Sylvia said as she stopped the car. "The woman being attacked used to be my homeroom teacher, Ms. Wildman," Caspian said. He was full of anger as he stepped out of the car. Sylvia was taken aback. She couldn't believe Caspian's homeroom teacher was being attacked in public. Having worked with him, she had also heard him mention Stephanie. Hence, she quickly got out of the car too. "You haven't paid your stall fee. If you don't pay, I'll beat you to death." A blond man grabbed Stephanie's hair as he shouted. "First, I don't have money," Stephanie cried out. "No money. Hit her," the blond man said angrily. Just as his subordinates were about to strike, a furious roar came from behind them. "Stop it." Startled by the sudden voice, everyone present was taken aback. Even the thugs stopped in action as they turned to look behind them. They saw a burly man with an intimidating presence that made everyone tremble in fear striding over. Meanwhile, behind him was a stunning woman. Caspian approached Stephanie and grabbed the wrist of the person who had hit her. As the sound of bones breaking echoed, the blond man screamed in agony. His wrist was crushed by Caspian. Immediately after, Caspian delivered a kick to his stomach. The blond man groaned before flying backward, crashing hard on the ground and coughing up blood. The onlookers were bewildered as they witnessed the scene. The other thugs were preparing to attack Caspian, but Sylvia had already stepped in. Her movements were swift as she struck the thugs with incomprehensible speed. The thugs screamed in agony as they fell to the ground. When Caspian saw that Sylvia was dealing with them, he assisted Stephanie to stand up. Chapter 126, The Girl of All Boys' Dream. "Thank you for saving me, but I advise you to leave quickly. These thugs won't let this matter go easily." Stephanie was in a mess. Her hair was blocking her sight, so she didn't see that the person in front of her was Caspian. "Ms. Wildman, it's me!" Caspian lowered his voice. It deeply upset Caspian to see his teacher, who had been so kind to him in the past, in such a miserable state. When Stephanie heard how she was being addressed, she instantly froze in place. She pushed her hair aside and saw the person standing in front of her was Caspian. "Caspian, it's you! What a coincidence to meet you here!" Stephanie exclaimed with joy and surprise. She had taught many students, but most didn't leave a strong impression. However, Caspian was unforgettable. Despite his family's poverty, he excelled academically. She was naturally taken aback to meet him again after so many years. "I happened to pass by here and saw this scene. What's going on?" Caspian inquired. "I was selling vegetables by the roadside, but these thugs demanded a fee. When I refused, they hit me," Stephanie said, her gaze filled with misery. "Shouldn't you be teaching at the school? Why have you become a street vendor?" Caspian asked, perplexed. "I'm no longer a teacher. The school expelled me," she replied with a hint of sadness as she lowered her eyes. "Why? What was the reason?" Caspian was astonished. In his eyes, Stephanie excelled in both personality and teaching ability. The school should have promoted her, not expelled her. "It's a long story. Let's find another place to talk." Stephanie feared that the thugs might return, so she wanted to leave the place quickly. "Sure, Ms. Wildman, please get in my car." Caspian, too, found that it wasn't appropriate to linger there any longer. As for the overturned vegetable stand, Caspian wouldn't let Stephanie do such business anymore. Since he had met her again, he was determined to find a way to help her. Caspian then helped Stephanie into his car, and Sylvia drove them away. The thugs who were knocked to the ground noted down the license plate of the SUV driven by Sylvia. The yellow-haired thug made a call to his boss. "Ms. Wildman, could you please tell me in detail why the school dismissed you?" Caspian asked eagerly in the car. "About half a year ago, there was a student named Jeremy Lincoln in my class. He's a spoiled child with a powerful background. One evening after school, he attempted to force himself on a girl named Lana Thomas. She refused and jumped from the 4th floor to escape. She sustained severe injuries and is currently undergoing treatment in the hospital. However, the school feared Jeremy's background, so they kept the incident a secret," Stephanie said somewhat angrily. Caspian was furious when he heard this. He had just finished a meeting with the responsible officials in South Lake City today and aimed to reform the city. He hadn't expected his own teacher to encounter such a situation. "I couldn't accept it. I wanted to help that girl and reported the matter to the Inspector General's office. However, the boy's family background was so powerful that they called the school and accused me of problematic teaching methods, which resulted in my dismissal," she said helplessly. "What happened next? Then, I became the scapegoat for Lana's incident. The final report issued by the school claimed that I physically abused Lana, which led her to jump off the building due to emotional distress. Ultimately, I was expelled from the school," Stephanie answered with sadness in her eyes. She had carried this burden in her heart for a long time. She finally poured it all out after meeting someone she could confide in. "Bullshit. What kind of background does Jeremy have?" Caspian asked. At this moment, his heart was filled with anger. His former teacher was subjected to such unfair treatment and became a scapegoat, while the culprit was unscathed. Jeremy's father, Belvin Lincoln, is the 4th in command in South Lake City, Stephanie said. "It's him. Belvin was just a lowly official in South Lake City. He was so unimportant that he wasn't even invited to today's meeting." Caspian was familiar with everything about South Lake City, including its political circles. Hence, he knew Belvin. The meeting held by the investigative team today wasn't something Belvin could attend as he was far from qualified to join. Belvin's son not only attempted to force himself on a girl but also colluded with the school to cover up the truth. Caspian couldn't tolerate this. "Ms. Wildman, you could easily secure a position with your abilities in another school. Why did you end up in such a situation?" Caspian asked, trying to ease the mood. He was well aware of her teaching skills and capabilities. It was impossible that no schools or companies wanted to hire her. Despite Stephanie being Caspian's teacher, she was only 4 years older than him. At that time, Stephanie had been admitted to a university and came to teach at South Lake City High School immediately after graduating. She was assigned to an AP class, which showed the school's appreciation for her talent, as they trusted her with such an important responsibility. When Caspian was in his senior year in high school, he was only 17 or 18 years old. Meanwhile, Stephanie had just graduated. So, there was hardly any age difference between them. Besides, she was the dream girl of all the boys in the class back then. Stephanie was the topic of discussion of countless boys. It was very surprising for a beautiful and talented lady like her to end up in such a predicament. After the school expelled me, the public assumed that I was responsible for the girl's incident. Not a single school was willing to hire me, and they were all afraid of offending the Lincoln family. The Lincoln family stated that any organization or school that employed me would be going against them. Helpless, I could only sell vegetables on the street, sighed Stephanie. Ms. Wildman, trust me. I have a way to get you back to teaching, Caspian said firmly. Please spare me the comforting words. You've no background. How could you possibly contend with the Lincoln family? Stephanie said helplessly. However, she didn't know that her former student was now a powerful figure, the Dieteranian god of war, revered by many. She only knew that he had become the son-in-law of the Stewart family. Chapter 127. The Truth. I'll find a way. You just need to trust me, Caspian said casually. Caspian, don't provoke the Lincoln family. And don't act rashly. The Lincoln family has a lot of influence in South Lake City. Stephanie reminded Caspian as she was worried that he might act impulsively. Stephanie knew about the memorial Caspian held for his foster mother. She saw Lilith's intense battle on TV. However, due to her circumstances, she had to continue selling vegetables and couldn't attend the memorial. As for what transpired during the memorial service, she had no idea of it. Since it's lunchtime, shall we grab something to eat together? Caspian suggested. In his eyes, Belvin was merely a clown. It would be a piece of cake for Caspian to destroy him. As for Jeremy, he needed to face the consequences of his actions. If the Lincoln family refused to change, Caspian wouldn't mind making them disappear from South Lake City the same way as the York family did. With his current authority, he didn't even consider the York family and the Flying Dragons a threat. The Lincoln family was nothing to him. Caspian could bring the Lincoln family to their downfall with just a wave of his hand. However, this incident had happened too long ago. It must have been Ezekiel who covered up the matter back then. Now that he had been brought to justice, Caspian would have to wait for Joey to become the new Inspector General to proceed with the investigation. Come to my place. I'll cook a few dishes for you. Eating at a restaurant is too expensive, Stephanie suggested. Ms. Wildman, it's just a simple meal. It won't cost much. I can afford it, Caspian replied. He wouldn't let Stephanie pay. Her life was already quite difficult, and he didn't want to impose by eating at her place. There's rumors out there that you haven't been working. Do you have money? Stephanie asked. As a man, I have some savings, he replied awkwardly. He couldn't explain his situation in detail, so he made up a lie. Caspian, you were the smartest student in school back then. Now that you're married, you should find a decent job to support your family. Otherwise, how can you face me? Stephanie shook her head and advised. Don't worry, I'll definitely find a good job. Caspian nodded. He wouldn't be upset by her words. After all, Stephanie was like an older sister to him, and she didn't know his true identity. All right, I'll keep an eye on you. You've half a month to get a job. If you still can't get a job by then, I won't acknowledge you as my student anymore, Stephanie remarked. Upon hearing her words, Caspian felt a surreal feeling. It was as if he had returned to his student days, being watched by his teacher all the time. Don't worry, Ms. Wildman. Within half a month, I'll definitely secure a very good job, Caspian said with a smile. All right, I'll be waiting. She nodded. Let's have a meal first and continue the conversation, he suggested. Watch how I'll spend all your savings. Then you won't have a choice but to work, Stephanie teased. Caspian, what should we eat? Asked Sylvia, who was accompanying them. Shall we go to that place, Amenity Hotel? Caspian pointed not far ahead. All right. Sylvia nodded. Don't go to that hotel. I heard it's so expensive there. It's a 5-star hotel, Not a place for common people, Stephanie said. Although she had been teaching with a modest salary, she knew that the expenses in a five-star hotel were beyond most people's means. Don't worry, Ms. Wildman. I have money, assured Caspian. When Stephanie heard his response, she didn't say much more. She knew Caspian had married Willow from the Stewart family, and her family was quite influential. Perhaps Willow had given him some money. Sylvia drove them to Amenity Hotel, and the three of them entered. The service in the five-star hotel was exceptionally attentive. As they appeared at the entrance, the staff greeted them with smiles. Despite their plain outfits, the staff didn't show any contempt. There were many influential figures who came to the hotel looking dressed down, so the staff learned to never judge a book by its cover. Since Caspian had many things he wanted to discuss with Stephanie, he booked a private room. This was Stephanie's first time dining in such an upscale hotel, and she felt a bit uncomfortable. After they entered the private room, Caspian ordered several dishes. Ms. Wildman, what about the girl? How is she now? Caspian inquired. She injured her spine after jumping from the fourth floor, and she's been undergoing treatment in the hospital. They spent millions, but unfortunately, her condition hasn't improved at all, said Stephanie. Did the school or the Lincoln family compensate her? Caspian asked, puzzled. The school may be the scapegoat, but I don't have the money to compensate her. As for the Lincoln family, they wouldn't offer any compensation, she answered helplessly. I see. Who's the current principal of the school? The current principal is Esmond Leonard. He took over a year ago, Stephanie replied. I understand. Caspian nodded. He felt that the previous principal wouldn't have allowed such an outrageous situation. So it turned out that there was a new principal. This principal Leonard is the worst. Not only did he harass female teachers, but he also took no action against the Lincoln family. I can't understand how he got into that position, Stephanie exclaimed in anger. No wonder the school is in a mess. It's because of the useless and arrogant principal. Caspian vented his frustration. There's no use being frustrated. You have no authority to intervene in this matter, Stephanie said, feeling Caspian was merely expressing his annoyance without any real power to address the issue. However, Caspian was silently pondering. If his former school knew that he was now the Dieteranian god of war, they might celebrate his return with enthusiasm. Then, Stephanie continued, Jeremy is just a spoiled brat who takes advantage of his father's power and commits all sorts of evil deeds. Caspian couldn't contain his anger. Previously, there was Derek, and now there was Jeremy. There seemed to be no shortage of jerks in South Lake City. If Lana hadn't jumped from the fourth floor, she would have surely fallen victim to his cruelty. However, she also paid a painful price for her impulsiveness. If she doesn't get treatment soon, she may never walk again, Stephanie lamented. When I have time, I'll go visit the girl, Caspian stated. Stephanie was the girl's teacher, as well as his own teacher. So, the girl could be considered his junior in a way. All right, when I have time, I'll take you there. Let me tell you, I see your past in this girl. She excelled academically, always ranking at the top. It's just a pity that she encountered this. Stephanie's voice trailed off, and tears welled up in her eyes. Chapter 128, Coincidence. After listening to Stephanie, Caspian felt an uneasy feeling in his heart. Lana was a girl with a bright future, which was now ruined. Lana came from a modest family. She's an only child, and I visited her family before. They've spent a lot on medical bills, and now their lives are very difficult. I wanted to help them, but Lana's parents refused to take my money since they knew I wasn't the real culprit. Stephanie shared as she poured her heart out to Caspian. Jeremy is an asshole for turning a good girl into such a state. A family has shattered because of him. She felt more helpless as she spoke. Caspian and Sylvia were furious after hearing this. They wished they could tear Jeremy apart right then and there. At that moment, a waiter came in and said, I'm sorry, a few very important guests suddenly arrived. They want to dine in this private room. I apologize, but could you move to another room? Hearing this, Caspian's and Sylvia's faces turned grim. Why? We were here first. Aren't we very important guests too? I'll get a very important person membership right now, Sylvia said. She was a general officer, and Caspian was the Dieteranian god of war. Shouldn't they be treated as esteemed very important person customers? I'm really sorry, it was unexpected. The newcomers have a powerful background, and we didn't dare to offend them, the waiter nervously apologized. The waiter could sense that Caspian and the others weren't easy to handle. We should follow the principle of first come, first served. We were here first in the room, and already ordered our food. Now, you want us to move? Is this the service of a 5-star hotel? Sylvia said, somewhat irritated. It would be an insult to Caspian's title as the Dieteranian god of war if they were to move rooms. I'm really sorry. Please understand our situation, the waiter said with a wry smile. I want to talk to your manager. I don't want to waste time with you. Sylvia cut the chase as she was uninterested in conversing with the waiter anymore. Sorry, our manager isn't here. I'll report this to the supervisor, the waiter said, as he was unsure of how to handle the situation. He didn't want to trouble the manager. After all, it was a 5-star hotel. If they went to the boss with every little issue, it would be overwhelming. Caspian, let's switch rooms. There's no need to get upset over a minor issue, Stephanie suggested, trying to defuse the situation. Ms. Wildman, it doesn't matter whether we move or not. I just want to see what kind of person is so arrogant and insists on kicking us out, Caspian said coldly. He couldn't believe that trouble would find him even when he wanted to have a simple meal. Shortly after, a pretentious man in a suit strutted into the room accompanied by a few arrogant lackeys. Mr. Lincoln will dine in this room. Hurry up and leave, the manager shouted as soon as he entered. Tell them to get lost. Sylvia's expression hardened, her anger evident. She hadn't expected the manager to be so unreasonable. Just because you're pretty doesn't mean you can be rude. Apologize to Mr. Lincoln now, or I'll have you thrown out, the manager retorted with a dark face. At that moment, a man in his 20s took a few steps forward and said arrogantly, "Who dares disrespect me?" When Stephanie saw the boy, she was dumbfounded. The so-called Mr. Lincoln was none other than Jeremy, the jerk who tried to force himself on Lana. Stephanie hadn't anticipated running into him here. It's me. Do you have a problem with that? Sylvia's tone turned cold. Mr. Yondu, call security and kick these people out. I booked this room for today, Jeremy stated bluntly. All right, Mr. Lincoln, I'll take care of it right away. James Yondu took out a walkie-talkie from his waist and called for security. Jeremy, don't go too far. I was your teacher before. We'll leave now. There's no need to kick us out. When Stephanie saw that the situation was tense, she hurriedly stood up and intervened. Caspian and Sylvia didn't know Jeremy, but hearing Stephanie address him left them stunned. They never expected such a coincidence. Even if Jeremy hadn't shown up, Caspian would have found a way to locate him. Recognizing Stephanie's voice, Jeremy smiled. What a coincidence. Ms. Wildman, you're dining here too. The manager paused when he saw this. Caspian, let's leave. Stephanie didn't want to spare another glance at Jeremy. She just wanted to get away from there quickly. Don't worry, Ms. Wildman. I'm here, Caspian said calmly, reassuring her. He had planned to confront Jeremy, but now that Jeremy had come to him on his own, how could Caspian miss this opportunity? Caspian was curious about how far Jeremy's arrogance could go. Exactly, Ms. Wildman, I wouldn't do anything to harm you. Let's catch up a bit. Why the rush? Jeremy said with a smirk. Jeremy and the affluent young men behind him didn't recognize Caspian and Sylvia. Even though Caspian's reputation as a good-for-nothing had spread throughout South Lake City, not everyone knew him. What are you up to, Jeremy? Stephanie asked. Ms. Wildman, what else can one do at a hotel? I'm inviting you for a meal. How could I possibly kick my teacher out? Jeremy pretended to be sad. Then, he gestured, and his lackeys rushed in. I won't have this meal with you. Stephanie was firm. She would rather starve than have anything to do with such a scoundrel. Ms. Wildman, you were once my teacher. Let's catch up and chat while we eat, Jeremy shamelessly insisted as he sat beside Stephanie. The rest of his lackeys also took their seats. Get the hell out of here, Caspian suddenly bellowed. Jeremy and his cronies were startled, visibly shaken by Caspian's outburst. Why are you shouting? Jeremy was somewhat annoyed. You're not qualified to join us for a meal. Besides, can you afford dining in a 5-star hotel? Caspian said coldly. You think I can't afford it? Guys, did you hear that? Jeremy laughed and glanced at those around him. Then, he continued, you're really stupid. You should know who my dad is, right? I never pay for my meals. My dad covers the bill for me. I know your dad is the 4th in command in South Lake City, but does he have that much money to spend in such a luxurious hotel? Caspian asked. You're quite funny. Isn't it simple to get an invoice? He can just say it's for work purposes, then get reimbursed, Jeremy said smugly. Chapter 129. You are in big trouble. Are the public funds meant for your extravagance? Caspian questioned. Jeremy blatantly ignored Caspian as he had no interest in talking with him anymore. Instead, he grinned, turned to Stephanie, and said, Ms. Wildman, who's this guy? Is he your boyfriend? Shut up. He was my student. Don't talk nonsense. Stephanie retorted in irritation. Oh, he was your student. I thought you were so lonely that you went to find a boyfriend. Jeremy smirked. Mind your words. Stephanie replied. She was angry and embarrassed. Miss Wildman, you're so beautiful. Why don't you have a boyfriend? Jeremy looked at her from top to bottom. Whether I have a boyfriend or not is none of your business. She replied coldly. But Jeremy didn't care as he continued to stare at her. It's a pity. Why not let me be your boyfriend? That way, you won't be lonely anymore. I assure you, I'll help you return to teaching. He looked at her lustfully. Disgusting. You shameless person. Keep dreaming. Stephanie couldn't contain her anger. Jeremy's shamelessness and his thoughts about her enraged her. After all, she was his teacher. Caspian's anger had reached its peak seeing Jeremy's behavior. Meanwhile, Sylvia was itching to go and give that jerk a good kick. Ms. Wildman, I'll be honest and tell you that I like you. If you're willing to be my girlfriend, I can guarantee that your life will be 10 times better than it is now, Jeremy stated. He had long harbored thoughts about Stephanie. He was fond of mature women like her but hadn't found the right moment to make a move. Ms. Wildman, what are you hesitating for? Yeah, as long as you agree, Mr. Lincoln will make you the happiest woman ever. The Lincoln family is very influential. Countless women wish to be his girlfriend. Jeremy's followers chimed in. His followers consist of students and other kids from affluent families, but none had an influential background like Jeremy, which was why they willingly followed him. At this moment, Stephanie felt both angry and embarrassed. She didn't know what to say. You jerks. Get down and apologize to Ms. Wildman right now. Otherwise, get ready to face the consequences. Caspian had reached his limit. What? Who do you think you are? Jeremy scoffed. You don't have to know who I am, but know that I can easily bring down your entire family, Caspian said fiercely. Apologize. Why should I apologize? Before you go around with your threat, get to know my background. I am insulting her. What are you going to do? Jeremy burst into laughter. Before he could finish, a crisp sound echoed. Caspian stood up and slapped him. Jeremy spun in place a few times before stumbling. A few of his teeth flew out. Jeremy. His followers panicked and rushed up to help him. Stephanie was startled to witness this, fearing that Caspian might get into trouble. Asshole. How dare you hit me? You must be tired of living. Jeremy cursed. You deserved it for insulting my teacher. Caspian retorted coldly. Teach him a lesson. Jeremy impatiently ordered his followers. Though he knew Caspian wasn't easy to deal with, there were 8 of them, so it shouldn't be a problem if all of them fought against Caspian. 8 men charged at Caspian. Ah. The room echoed with cries of pain. Before Caspian could act, Sylvia had taken all 8 of them down with her slender legs. How could these people be a match for her? Each had bright red palm marks on their faces. When the hotel manager saw this, he was stunned. He could sense trouble coming his way, especially from Belvin, as his son was being hit right now. The manager was terrified and immediately left the room to call his boss. Stephanie was absolutely terrified. I'll give you another chance. Apologize to Ms. Wildman right now. Caspian's tone was firm. If Stephanie wasn't in the room, he would have definitely shown his skills and taught these jerks a lesson. Keep dreaming. Jeremy was haughty. A crisp sound filled the room again as Caspian slapped him once more. Ah. Jeremy's face twisted in pain as he fell to the ground. Caspian, why did you guys start a fight? Stephanie finally came to her senses and asked nervously. These assholes were insulting you. I want them to remember this. Caspian stated. However, this matter wouldn't end here. Caspian had to make Jeremy pay a painful price. Caspian, you've caused trouble, Stephanie exclaimed. Ms. Wildman, don't worry, I can handle this. Caspian answered calmly. You're Caspian. Jeremy was stunned when he heard Stephanie call out Caspian's name. That's right, Caspian answered calmly. You're the famous good-for-nothing of South Lake City, the disgraceful son-in-law of the Stewart family. What a disgrace. Jeremy taunted. You're the real disgrace. If you're not satisfied, I'll give you a chance to call for help. Caspian scornfully replied. Fine. This matter won't end so easily. Jeremy stood up. He waved his hand and left with his followers. He knew they couldn't beat Caspian, so he didn't want to suffer a loss. He planned to find more powerful men to teach Caspian a lesson later. Hold on, Caspian shouted. What more do you want? Jeremy shivered when he heard Caspian shout. You haven't apologized yet. I'm giving you the chance to do so right now, Caspian said expressionlessly. Jeremy laughed. I'll give you a chance too. If you apologize to me, I'll pretend today never happened. Jeremy forced a smile, but he was actually panicking inside. Scram, Caspian bellowed. Jeremy immediately led his followers out of the hotel. Seeing them leave, Stephanie said anxiously, Caspian, you've stirred up big trouble. We should get out of here quickly. Chapter 130. The legendary Golden Dragon card. Ms. Wildman, the dishes are about to arrive. Let's finish our meal and then leave, Caspian said. How are you still in the mood to eat? Jeremy will definitely seek revenge on you. Stephanie was anxious. It's fine. I'm confident. I'm more worried he won't shut up. Caspian smiled and replied, You know who his father is, right? Aren't you worried? She asked with confusion. Ms. Wildman, don't you know I'm acquainted with General Anderson of South Aridlands? Caspian had to bring up John as he didn't want to expose his true identity for now. I know. He attended your wedding and your foster mother's memorial service. Stephanie nodded. That's right. If Jeremy dares to come after me, I can have General Anderson step in. He said, I'm a little relieved to hear that. She was relieved and glad that Caspian had a powerful backup. Just then, a middle-aged man with his hair slicked back came into the room with 10 other men in black suits. The hotel manager followed behind him obediently. The middle-aged man was George Jenkins, the owner of Amenity Hotel. Where's Mr. Lincoln? George asked. I beat him up and sent him away, Caspian said nonchalantly. What? How dare you lay hands on Mr. Lincoln? George was startled. We're trying to have a meal while he was making a ruckus and disturbing my peace, Caspian explained. Mr. Lincoln is our esteemed guest. How dare you lay a finger on him? Are you tired of living? George was furious. Jeremy's father, Belvin, held a high position in South Lake City. George had been trying to win over the Lincoln family. However, today's incident had crushed his dreams, so he was enraged. Kick them out. George ordered the bodyguards behind him. The 10 bodyguards immediately rushed forward. Stephanie was trembling in fear at the sight. She had never encountered such a situation before. She never expected such violent conduct from a 5-star hotel. Caspian hadn't anticipated this either. He just wanted to take Stephanie for a good meal, yet things weren't in his favor. Seeing this, Sylvia strode forward and stood in front of Caspian. Her duty was to protect him. Get out right now, otherwise, you'll be crawling out later, one of the men in black shouted. The last person who talked to me like that is already dead. A glint of coldness flashed in Sylvia's eyes. Caspian, let's go. This will only escalate further. Stephanie hurriedly said to Caspian when she saw Sylvia was preparing to attack again. Ms. Wildman, we're their customers. Yet, they're not treating us like one. We can't leave and let them get away with this. Caspian felt it was troublesome at first, but these people were unreasonable, and he couldn't swallow this insult. The owner of this hotel surely has connections to be able to open a 5-star hotel. Look at the bodyguards. They're no ordinary people. Let's not cause more trouble. Let's leave quickly. Stephanie shook Caspian's arm and wanted to leave as soon as possible, feeling terrified. Meanwhile, the 10 bodyguards had already rushed toward Sylvia as she swung her fists and hit them hard. The 10 bodyguards were no match for her. They didn't get a chance to fight back before falling to the ground and crying in pain. This is the power of a general officer. She ended the fight instantly. Although Sylvia was a woman, she had experienced life and death situations with Caspian. Hence, her skills were exceptional. How could these ordinary bodyguards possibly be her match? When George saw his highly paid bodyguards being defeated so easily, he was dumbfounded. It happened so fast that he didn't see what happened. All he saw was his bodyguards lying on the ground, moaning in pain. The hotel manager trembled in fear as he was in disbelief at the scene in front of him. Even Stephanie was shocked to see Sylvia's swift movement. Sylvia looked like a refined lady, yet she had such exceptional skills. "Are you still going to kick us out?" Sylvia asked with her arms crossed. George swallowed hard. He was sweating all over and didn't know what to do. "If there's nothing else, leave now." "I'm going to have a meal with my teacher," Caspian said indifferently, not bothering to even look at George. "I'm the owner, and you're trying to kick me out." "Mr. Yondu, they don't look wealthy. Why don't we stop them at the door?" George exclaimed. James understood George's words and turned to Caspian, saying, "Settle your bill now. Otherwise, I'll call the Inspector General's office and have all of you arrested. The food isn't here yet, but you want us to pay. Is this the service of a 5-star hotel?" Sylvia impatiently retorted. "Who knows if you have money or not? If you dine and dash, it's a loss for our hotel," James replied. "Enough. Stop the nonsense. Go get the bill." Caspian waved his hand as he didn't want to deal with them anymore. If this went on, it would only ruin his appetite. James hurried off to find the waiter and soon returned. "You've spent a total of $28,500, the waiter said. Sylvia didn't rush to pay. She didn't want to overshadow Caspian in front of Stephanie. When Stephanie heard the price, she was startled. The expenses in a 5-star hotel were something most people couldn't afford. "Caspian, let's go. The food here is too expensive," Stephanie anxiously suggested. "Don't worry. I have enough for this," Caspian said, pulling out a black card with a golden dragon border. The card was custom, made for him by Balthazar, and had no spending limit. Since Caspian had no cash on hand, he could only use this card to settle the bill. "I'll pay by card." He gave the card to the manager. James found the card in Caspian's hand strange. Although it had a golden border, he had never seen such a card before. "What kind of card is this? Don't try to fool us with some random card. You talk too much. Just swipe it, and you'll know." Caspian impatiently replied, "If you dare to dine and dash, be prepared to be taken away by the Inspector General," James threatened. This was the first time Stephanie saw such a black card, and she panicked even more. She had heard a lot about Caspian being a loser. Could he come up with so much money? George had broader knowledge. He was staring at Caspian's card. Apart from the golden border, there was an embossed pattern of a soaring golden dragon.